Are you looking for a homeschool curriculum that's flexible, engaging, and approved for Step Up for students? Let me tell you about Discover by Bridgeway Academy. It's more than just a curriculum, it's really a journey. Discover is designed for students in grades 1 through 8, and it blends colorful hands on lessons with the flexibility homeschool families need. Whether it's language arts, math, science, or social studies, each subject is built to meet academic standards and, most importantly, spark curiosity. And it's all designed to fit your unique schedule. With built in lesson plans, progress tracking, and online support, Discover takes the guesswork out of homeschooling. So whether you're brand new or a seasoned pro, you'll feel confident from day one. Now, if you're not using state funding, you can get 20% off with promo code DISFPEA20E at checkout. Visit discoverk8learning.com. That's discover K, the number 8, learning.com. Again, that's discoverk8learning.com to learn more and save today.
It just, Suzanne, it brings tears to my eyes
Yeah.
because it's a generational impact. And you don't see that when you're going through the really hard, everyday, monotonous, this is going to drive me crazy. Please read this book one more time. You know what,
Yes.
honey? I would love to read that book to you. There is nothing more valuable to me right now than reading this book to you.
Yeah.
And so, or there's nothing more valuable. My kids would be like, but Mom, what about school? We're going to go spend time with Grandma. I'm like, you know what? The most important thing right now is we get to spend time with her. We don't know how much time she has left. Huckleberry Finn will be there when we get back home tonight.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go show Grandma that she's valued. And all of those things, that's home education to me.
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. Today I am talking with Cheryl Bastian, early childhood educator, home educator, speaker, and author. We have an amazing conversation about Cheryl's own childhood learning challenges and how they help to shape her understanding of education. We also explore the beauty of teaching through experiences and building a custom education for your children. Listen with me now.
So I grew up in a really small town in the Northeast, really small, like farm town, which afforded me acres and acres and afforded me, my dad had a wood shop, so I spent a lot of time there, just very hands-on, very real life experiences. There were risks because we had tree houses in the woods. And like, I think about all those things, and that's exactly the environment I needed as a learner, because learning for me was very difficult. I do remember going for testing, but I don't even remember like what the diagnoses were. And I don't really care, to be honest.
Right.
I just know that my mom said, they told me you would never read or write, which I think, wow, interesting. And I processed very different. So I always thought that I didn't like math and science, but when I looked back at it, the math and science that I liked were the math and science I learned in my dad's wood shop, or by raising the chickens, or growing a garden, or talking to the really interesting people that my parents introduced me to and afforded me to spend time with, whether it be the feed mill or the auto mechanic or the egg man, whatever that was. And so, I loved that question because it made me really think, wow, I had a very not by the book childhood when you consider like all the things that were afforded to me and my parents just immersed me in. But yet it was exactly what I needed.
When were you aware as a child that maybe you were learning differently or that you were struggling yourself?
I would say probably maybe first grade, but for sure by third grade.
Okay.
Because everybody else was reading and I wasn't. And all of a sudden I found myself going out to the resource room. They were like, "Oh, you're going to go meet with the reading lady." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds great." And then I got there and I went, "Wait a minute, there's nobody else here except for other people."
Yeah.
So then I realized, wow, that's a little different. I don't get to be in the classroom. So that's when what became known to me, or I started remembering, wow, I must be different.
Well, and so you were, it sounds like in a traditional, probably public school education.
Yes, I would say so, but it was not traditional from like I feel like it had a very Montessori as far as like if you had to use vocabulary for today,
Right.
it was very Montessori,
Okay.
very hands-on.
So which was good learning for
Oh
you.
yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
you were young then and you were recognizing that you love to learn by
Mm,
experiencing things, probably. I know when you're running around and have the freedom to do those things, you don't feel frustrated because you're soaking it up
mm,
and taking it all in. I was a bit of a wild child as a youngster. So
mm.
it's like, you enjoy those moments. How did it feel for you to go to school?
Gosh, that's a good question, Suzanne. I liked it. I would say an extrovert, if you want to use those terms. I
Mm-hmm.
loved the kids. I loved the environment. I love learning. I absolutely love learning. But my favorite learning was like when the art man would come every day, every week
Mm,
and give us the scrap box. And I was like, oh, yeah, I love your scrap box. I don't
right.
really care about like the project we're doing, but I want the scrap box. Or like the recess and just having literally there were acres. It was not just this little fenced in playground. It was hills and just we could roll down the hill. And so all the things I needed for whole body learning.
So, and you were actually able to access that at school too.
I was.
That's
Mhm.
fantastic. I mean, honestly, so it probably didn't leave you quite as frustrated when you were young because you were able to experience that. What was it like as you grew into your middle and high school years?
Well, it was rough. I would say that thankfully I had a fourth grade teacher and she realized some of my giftings. And so she started introducing me to the things that I was good at.
Mhm.
She also, instead of having to write my spelling words, which happened in third grade, like I'd have to write my spelling words instead of going out for recess,
Oh, yeah.
she allowed me to go out for recess and said, we're not going to worry about the spelling words, really. But she then taught me through my strengths. There weren't that many kids in the class, well, maybe 15. And so she was really able to hone into each child and their strengths. And so I think that helped me as I move into middle school years.
Mhm.
The other thing that helped me was sixth grade was still in elementary school. So it was not, I didn't have that pressure to have to like be in a middle school. I was still in the elementary building. So we were still able to play. We had office duty. So I could go to the office and volunteer some time out of my classroom day to go answer the phones alongside the secretary. We also acted out like all of the Revolutionary War when we were studying that. We acted it out. We had a camp day. So it really wasn't even my middle school. I would say we still had industrial arts class. So we had wood shop. We were melting metal to make metal projects from in the foundry. We had photography class. So we were able to develop our own pictures in a dark room. So there were still very hands-on things that allowed me to really enjoy the things that I liked. I was very much creative. When I
Yeah.
got to high school, it was rough. I think the other thing that helped me in between, somewhere in the middle school years, I just realized math was going to be hard and I was going to have to take extra time. And honestly, Suzanne, it wasn't until I went to college that
Mhm.
I learned why I learned or how I learned differently because I was an education major learning. I was special ed first, which is what they called it then. That's not what they call it now. But
Right.
I then started, as I learned how to teach kids math, I was like, oh, like 5 and 8 and 13 always go together. Nobody's trying to trick me. So I realized for the first time, like this learning thing was
Mhm.
not about tricking. It was actually about learning. I could do math if you gave me a tape measure. I could read it. I could do math if it was my bead business, because I did have a bead business. I was able to do the math,
Mhm.
but it was the classroom that really was hard for me.
Right. So that's interesting because you say you went to college, it sounds like with the intent to become a teacher.
Yes.
And it's so funny to me that with the struggles that you had in school or, with learning, that was still something that you were driven to. What do you think made you want to teach and not lean into something that maybe was one of your stronger areas of gifting that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think because I wanted other kids to realize that learning, and even in today, part of, when we're homeschooling my kids, I want learning to not just be quote school. It's learning. It's all day. It's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when somebody made that click for me, I said, I want other kids to know that. Like, yeah, math might be hard for you, but boy, you have so much value. Here's the strengths that you have. Here are the ways that even if we have to learn math, we can do it a different way and you can still learn it.
Right.
I think in high school, backing up to that, I moved between middle and high school, which was very difficult. I moved from a very small town to a city, well, suburb, but very not like I grew up in. And that was a difficult thing in the middle school years. So that was hard. I weathered it well. I think that it taught me a lot introspectively as I learned about who I was and what I still had to offer. That's the other thing. I wanted kids to know, look, everybody has a value, and we just got to figure out what that is and come alongside you and help to find that. And when I was in high school, I had all my credits done when we moved. And so the high school allowed me to leave the campus at noon and go to the local elementary school and work alongside the resource room gal. Okay. And she just loved on me and realized, wow, you have a real knack for teaching kids.
That's amazing.
Like you can come alongside and see their brain in ways I can't see it, And so that lit a fire in me and said, wow, I do have the value to bring to kids who were learning is hard. And so that fueled my desire to go to school to learn to be an educator.
That's amazing. When all of those things actually connect, it's interesting how it directs our lives into those places where we can really help others. So you went into education and were degreed and became a teacher. And were you in public school mostly, or were you more in private?
Well, actually, that's an interesting story.
Okay.
And I don't get to tell it very often. I finished all 4 years of college. I switched my major in between because I went from what they called special education at the time to early childhood education.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I did that was because when I came home from school, again, experiential learning, when I came home from college on summers, I went and worked at a local preschool here back when I came home on breaks. And so in that place, I had this amazing woman who loved early childhood and just understood how kids needed safety and learning and experiences and just all the things. It just really spoke to me as like, that's me. I want to be that kind of an educator.
Right.
And so she spent a lot of time with me and she said, you know what, I don't know that special education, like you're good at it, but I think you're really good at early childhood education. So I switched my major, which was fine. Like most of my classes, at least the general ed, or well, when I say general ed, not general ed, what we call general ed today, but like the general education degree, those classes were all taken care of, like my genetics class. And I was able to just carry those right over to early childhood. So my last 8 weeks, the state that I was going to school again, that college was amazing. It was a lab school.
Oh, wow.
And I never knew that those existed. So when I was learning ASL, I actually was in a building. My classroom was in a building where the kids that were deaf were being educated. So I rode the elevator with them. I communicated with them. It was like everything I learned at that college was hands-on because there was a lab preschool, a lab elementary, a lab special education department, a lab middle school. So every single class that I had was hands-on, every single component. So like my clinical hours were just off the charts before I even went to be a student, to do the student teaching. So, and it's different when you go from state to state. So I had gotten all those. Mike and I got married and we couldn't get married student housing. And because that school was so good, the state was saturated with educators. So Mike wasn't able to get a job.
Okay.
So we came back to Florida and he was able to get a job. And so I never finished my 8 weeks of student education or quote teacher education training.
Right.
Like the hands-on portion, which is kind of silly because I already had it all the way through. But
wow.
And then when I went to colleges to try to see if I could like transfer the credits, and it was this nightmare of a mess.
Yeah.
I'm not sad that we got married, obviously, but I
Right.
was 8 weeks short of that degree. So even with the 118 hours that I have towards towards a early childhood degree, I don't actually
You
have
don't
a
actually have a degree.
certificate. So I
That
don't have the paper,
that was
but I
so
have the experience.
there must be a little bit of frustration in that. One of the things that, was real frustrating to me was always as a teacher, I had to go back for more training and more training. It was like,
Mm,
you have so much experience, but if you don't have a certificate in
yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
it's like, where's the job? So you and Mike got married. So enter in the next phase of your story. So Mike is a teacher
Yep.
and is your husband. How long have you all been married now?
We've been married 36 years, maybe
Okay.
37. I don't know exactly. I could figure the math
Somewhere
out,
up
but
there.
that's not part of the discussion.
Somewhere up
So,
there.
and math is not my strong suit, remember? Anyway, it's like 36 years, and he's been teaching, every year. Because the preschool that I was working at that point, you didn't have to have a teacher certificate to teach the preschool.
Hmm.
So I walked into a job. They're like, we don't care if you have a piece of paper. We just want you to be because we know how amazing you are as an educator. So
Yeah.
I actually taught. And then we've had our first child. And Mike said, hey, have you ever thought about home education? And I was like, oh, no, no way. I love the classroom. My child, he can come to school with me, which he did. And so when we got to the point where he would enter kindergarten and we were actually expecting our second child, I decided to come home and start home education after researching, because I am a researcher. I love
Hmm.
education. So I like drink it in, it's like from the fire hose. I don't mind. I just read.
I'm
And I was like,
curious, what prompted Mike to think about home education, do you think?
he knew that I could give individual attention to whatever those strengths of our children would be. He knew
Hmm.
I was a passionate educator. He also knew the things that he was not able to do or give in the public school. And I know, I have amazing friends and family members that are educators, and
Hmm.
they're incredible educators. But there are some things he's like, I would love for our family to have that they're not going to be able to get. And one of those things too was the sibling relationships, although I didn't see it at the time.
Right.
He's like, they're going to be gone all day long, and then they're going to come home, or we might have music lessons or sports lessons or homework. They're
Hmm.
really not going to have the time. He said, I missed that when I was a child growing up. And I said, well, yeah, I kind of did too. I had a lot because of the adventures we had
Right.
growing up. I don't feel like I missed my brothers, but I do realize I didn't see them a lot.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah, we wanted that for our family. We wanted, just that ability for siblings, and we have a lot of family. Extended family is large. I just knew with all the, in a sense, busy work, it's not all busy work. And I
Right.
know that educators do a great job of trying to make it as hands-on experiential as they can. But I realized I wanted to maximize the time that we needed to spend on learning as far as like the book learning,
Right.
and maximize the time that we had for experiences that I was so fortunate to have.
Yeah. And I think no matter how much you make an effort to do it, when you're in a situation with teachers, and it was the same for me, I was 13 years in the classroom. There's only so much you can do when you have X number of students and everyone has, different needs, and you can't customize everything for every single child that goes through your room in a
Yeah.
day, so it's very
Yeah.
difficult. Home education allows you to do that because you have a smaller number of children you're working with. You didn't stop at a small number though. How many children do you and Mike have?
We have 8, but even that is a story. That's why I say life is learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's never a formula. It's never a formula.
Yeah.
I love children. Mike loves kids. I would have thought that I had 3, maybe 4. But again, I had some health challenges. It's a long story. That's a whole podcast, Suzanne. But came to the point where I was healed, and it was just, I have an astounding health story as
Hmm.
well. And we just kept saying, you know what, the more we were with our kids, the more we loved them. And the more we saw the sibling relationships, the more we said, you know what, our hands are open, whatever that looks like for our family. And yeah, we
Yeah.
both love children a lot.
Well, that
Um,
is that is very obvious. If you have any time to spend around you and your family or know anything about your family. So I guess then you did start home education and working with your children, so the younger children.
Mm,
What, I guess, at what juncture in that process did you move into more of a community and
mm,
then ultimately kind of into a leadership
mm,
role? Because, well, that's kind of a question. But before that, we may need to answer this one. You are not a traditional educator at home,
mm.
correct?
Yeah, yes.
Anything but. Right. So you're not really traditional. You were more experiential with your children,
Yes.
more hands-on with your children.
Yep.
So if anything, like my experience when I came home from the classroom to
Mm,
educate at home, I was a little intimidated by that. And as I started interacting with a lot of homeschool families, I was in a community with my oldest that it was still very driven to academic book work,
mm,
competing to get into college, wanting your kids to graduate really early, things like that. And for me, my goal was relationship, time with my kids, helping them lean into what they were good at, strong in, those things. And I was very eclectic versus the very traditional, highly academic, bookwork driven mindset. So for me, it was a little bit more awkward going into some of those communities because everybody wanted to know what, high level
mm.
class your kid was
Yes.
taking, right? How many of them? And I was like, "Oh, we're doing something totally different." And I would get a little bit of the shaming almost.
Yes,
So
yes.
I know that you were not traditional either. How did that go for you as far as like moving into the
Mm.
community where you didn't have children that you had raised to adulthood already that were a proven success?
Wow. Okay. So backing up, I still had to come out of my understanding because home education is a tutorial method of education. It's
Mhm.
different than what I was taught
Oh,
as an
absolutely.
education major. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it still took me, I would say, a good 3 to 4 years to realize, wait a minute, I can do this different and still do it and probably exceedingly well. And
Mhm.
I don't need to do it like they did. So yes, it was a gentle nudge for a couple years. It wasn't an immediate thing. But I also in our church realized that we did not have like a support group of any kind for home education. Most of the moms that were home educating were busy or under a private school, non-traditional private school. They really weren't around a lot.
Mhm.
But there was this huge group, probably 40 families that were home educating and they were not using, they've gone through the county for a home education program.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, the educator in me said, okay, we need a community of people where kids can come to, an arts night or have a science fair or do field trips together, go out and do the experiences, but have a community. So actually, in my second year of home education, I was asked to head up that group and I did.
Mhm.
I led that group for a long time, almost a decade.
Yeah.
And in that, just always encouraging families, and they encouraged me back. It's kind of like we were unraveling our understanding of education together.
Mhm.
And the more our kids experienced, actually, there was one mama who had been home educating about 6 or 8 years ahead of me. So her kids were almost in high school.
Okay.
And I saw, they came and they're like, Mrs. Bastian, we're learning Greek. And I'm like, you're learning Greek. Okay. And they're like, yesterday the entomologist came to my house and I didn't even know what an entomologist was.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, help me out. He's like, the bug man. I'm like, okay. We followed him around. And Suzanne, I kid you not, they had I went to their house and I just could not believe what education looked like in their home. It was
Mm.
so incredible. They had 3 shadow boxes of insects they had collected and learned about and knew the Latin names. And mom's like, I don't know. They just keep learning. They don't spend any time. They just keep, I'm like, this is not learning like I knew it to be. Right.
Mhm.
And they built, I kid you not, a 5-foot aircraft carrier out of Legos after going to the Pensacola Naval Station.
That's
And I
crazy.
went, this is not the education that I knew. Hmm. And they actually had very rare species of tortoise. They had the ability to do that and a license to do that that they were breeding them. And I was like, oh, wow, this is totally incredible. So they told me the whole process. And she's like, can you guys do homeschool evaluations? And I went, I think so, because my husband is a certified teacher and he has a current certificate. So yeah, we could do that. And I want to tell you the hour that I spent with them doing their evaluation, or Mike and I together, because we always sit together.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne, that was like a turning point for me. I realized these kids are incredibly, not only are they articulate and being able to speak with us and carry on an incredible conversation, they are so well educated, and they've only been educated at home. And the more I asked, the more I learned, the more I asked, the more I learned. Then I decided, you know what? When those experiences came up with my kids, I embraced those real life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I did that, the more I realized these kids are literally smarter than I am at this point.
Well,
Like,
and
and they're
it's
smarter than any curriculum out there. Like, you get to a point, photography so well that you could open your photography business. You're not going to be able to find introduction to creative photography at the homeschool convention and think that's going to meet their needs. You got to go
right.
find other resources.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the most incredible things about, the experiential learning and being engaged outside of
Yes.
books
Yes.
with people who are experts and with, the opportunity to just explore beyond your imagination or beyond what the boundaries might would say, right? I think that and that was something that for me was we were going to continue even through high school where I wanted my kids to experience more than they were in a book, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
when I say a book, I mean a textbook because
Right.
my kids were in books for sure.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of books. But, I realized that when you teach a child to learn and to
Right.
love learning,
Yeah.
they will just indulge themselves in books where they are learning what they want to learn and what's meaningful, to them, and embrace every opportunity to experience ways to learn. So you were introduced to that, and I'm thankful for that because you've done such an amazing job at sharing this with other families through the
Mm.
years. And then you led in the community in a small group. But, at what point did you become comfortable with or
Mm.
recognize the need to step outside of your local group? And
Mm.
because I mean, at this point, I know you've written at least 4 or 5 books. I know some of them have like multiple, like your Math Adventures has several books that you've written. So you've written a number of books. And one of my first introductions to you was more about finishing well with high school. And
Mm.
so that was, actually was leading and seeking out people to speak to the group I had. And you came along and I was like, I don't even have high schoolers yet. And I'm going to remember all of this or buy the book. I had to
You're
buy the
so
book for
funny.
that. But, it was amazing to me to look at the way that you even evaluated high school
Mm.
courses and made them make sense to
Mm.
me, who much like you wanted my kids to experience more and have internship opportunities and to do things, and you gave a path to that with your finishing well with high school. Can you talk about that a little bit, how you came to that place?
Sure. Suzanne, I think the background was, again, what spoke to me as a student. And looking back at the high school classes that I had that really like propelled me towards not just the strengths I had, the trajectory of how can I also come alongside other kids that are already doing amazing things and helping parents to say, wait a minute, if you're going to teach interpersonal communication, yes, you could get a curriculum to do that. But your child's already hiring and firing people at the local, restaurant up the street, like
Mm-hmm.
the HR person.
Yep.
Like, I think they probably have pretty versed in interpersonal communication skills if they're doing that. And I think it was also like seeing kids, the more we homeschooled, the more we got around in this community, because it grew to be quite large.
Mm-hmm.
We saw kids building businesses. I reflected back on my business and I was like, I learned if you've got a business and you've got to file taxes, you got to file your name, you got to do the LLC, you have to do all the cost analysis. Yeah, if you have a product, you got to figure out how much it's going to cost me to get the supplies, how much it's going to cost me to sell it, what's our profit and our loss and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my own daughters had her own business. And I went, she's learning business and entrepreneurial skills And I can go back, which I did because I call myself an education junkie. I would go back and I'd look at course syllabi from business and entrepreneurial principles in a traditional classroom. And I'd look at the skills and I'd say, oh, okay, check, check. We did that. We did that. But we have our own business. So not only are we doing that and actually like getting to try, take risks, make mistakes, try again. So you have all the soft skills that are coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we are doing that. So we don't necessarily need a textbook to complete those things. And then being able to say, okay, how can I empower other families? Because they would see what we're doing and they're like, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, look at the objectives, look at the standards for this class. You're doing that with this kid. If they're trying to get like their real estate license, which you can get at a pretty young age in high school, if you're already studying real estate and you're studying the stock market, are those things in high school because you're interested in it, just like the kids that I knew were teaching themselves Greek and Hebrew. Like you can teach yourself anything, and probably even in excess of a high school level. So it was just coming along. I just started coming alongside parents and saying, look at the amazing things you're doing. Look at your student, what they're already doing. And how can here's even what the state course code is. And you compare and they're like, oh my goodness, we're doing that. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, we're doing that. And I was like, yeah, you are. So it's basically an empowerment. We just given them the permission to say, you know what, you're overseeing the child's education. They're at a college level in whatever the skill is. Why couldn't you give them credit for that?
Yeah, that's crazy. It's funny to me to think about the fact when you put together, your journey so far, like from a child who at third grade, fourth grade was still struggling to read, right?
Yeah.
And now you're reading all of the details of these courses that nobody wants to take the time to read. Quite usually writing the book about it and home educating your children. So,
Yeah.
your journey really has now come full circle to you are the child who struggled to learn
Mm-hmm.
to empowering and equipping people to help all of their children, no matter what their strengths or weaknesses may be, to learn. And not
Yes.
only to learn, but to get credit for that so that they can, progress in their successful life ahead, with businesses that they build or with going
Yeah.
to college, whatever that may be. And I love your book, More Than Credits, too.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and
Yeah.
what inspired you to write that book?
Well, as Mike and I were meeting, because we've been doing evals almost as long as he's been a public school educator,
Mm-hmm.
as we began doing that, I realized that personal fitness, which is, a class that a lot of high schoolers take,
Right.
started looking different for kids. Let's say if they were a marathon runner, because we did know high schoolers that were marathon runners, and maybe they tore an Achilles, or maybe they had to learn the muscle groups in their legs, or maybe they had to fit themselves with shoes, because they wanted to make sure they weren't going to injure themselves.
Right.
That personal fitness looked different than a gymnast who was working on other skills, and her personal fitness looked different.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a kid who maybe is in a wheelchair. We've had children who've been bedbound or in a wheelchair, and their personal fitness is going to look different
Right.
than a kid who's a marathon runner. And again, going back to, well, I don't want kids just to read about taking a blood pressure. I want them to learn how to do that. Like, what is that instrument and how is it used and how do you do that?
Right.
So that can become part of personal fitness. And I started realizing that the things that propelled my children as adults, because they're incredible people. I love to spend time with them. They're all different, again, because of their strengths. How do I take those skills what's their personal fitness going to look like? What was their personal fitness looking like when into where they are today? And honestly, all of them as adults are still very fit and they pursue that. And I think part of the reason they pursue that is because in our home, personal fitness was a very personal, what does this mean for you? If you need to be gluten-free, that's part of your fitness, right? Or that's a nutrition and wellness, actually.
Right.
So then More Than Credits came alongside and said, okay, what are the actual skills that go into this? Not just the book knowledge, even though that's important, or what is the book knowledge and how can we make that experiential so that kids like myself who grew up needing the experiences to understand it, I wouldn't be able to memorize anything. Even today, I'm a different speaker because I can't get up and just memorize they're like, you just memorize. So again, a traditional speech class would say, memorize your speech. I could never memorize my speech.
Right.
I'm like, that's not going to happen. So I had to see a visual in my head or draw a picture. So More Than Credits takes like personal fitness and career development and philosophy, things that most people are doing in their everyday life,
Mm-hmm.
and says, you know what, if you're already doing it, let's figure out what that looks like versus just bringing in another book for your kid to read because, oh, we better do this book because everybody says this book's really good. You could actually be, your knowledge of personal fitness would be very different and you might be even deeper than what that course is gonna, or that book's gonna offer.
Right.
So it's basically just real life skills that kids need to function in life, like nutrition and wellness. I said to my husband, I was working as a concession stand volunteer when my kids I always try to get involved in their interests and walk alongside them, whatever that looks like. And I had never
Mm-hmm.
started a gas grill before because they scared me.
Yeah. Right.
And so I was like, how many homeschoolers know how to start a gas grill and not start themselves like on fire, like to do it safely?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how many times is that in nutrition and wellness? We teach them what grilling is and searing and boiling and steaming, but do we teach them how to turn on the grill? So that's actually one of the things in More Than Credits under nutrition and wellness. I was like, start a grill. That's
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's good. And I think that there's so often, you get the kids who may be high on the academic chain of book work, book knowledge, right?
Right.
And you do
Right.
see them struggle with real life implementation sometimes
Yep.
of
Yep.
the skill sets. So I love that book. I love the intention and the heart behind that book. Because I think it's so important. Often I think that it sets people apart who are home educating in the real world. When you see them graduate and you see them, functionally doing things that a lot of people, it's funny, I don't want to say amazed at, but a lot of people who don't home educate will be kind of shocked. Like, oh, your kid really knows how to do that well. Like talk to an adult, or
Right.
whatever it
Right.
is. Yeah. So, it's interesting to see some of those things play out over the years of, the investment. And then, you've graduated. How many of your children now are graduates?
Oh, wow. Oh, man. You're going to make me nostalgic.
Nostalgic.
We
I know.
just we just graduated our 6th.
Okay.
She was a senior this year, and yeah, they're all astoundingly different.
That's
They're
amazing.
all they're all astoundingly different.
But, it gives you real street cred, right? Because now you've graduated these kids. And because, when you start out, it's like you have ideas and you have philosophies and you have even methods you want to share with people. And you're like, I know this works, and I
Right.
believe in what I'm doing. And then, people will kind of look at you and you're like, oh, let's wait and see what happens when they can't get into college or, just
Right.
whatever is happening with them. And I think that when you have your graduates and you're kind of like, okay, now I've got some proof that these things work, even as far out as it may seem, or outside of the standard it may look, but it works. And I think that more and more then people want to engage with you. And you've written not only your books, but I know you write articles for
Mhm.
magazines and
Yep.
you do speak and you do share, with families all over the place. One of the things that I've always loved about in my position to have an opportunity to work with you is you have so much knowledge across such a wide spectrum of education
Mm,
that
mm.
it's fun to talk with you about what can you speak about and how can we make this look. And I remember, for instance, it's been a few years now, when you and I were talking about doing books and reading loud with younger children, picture
Yes.
books and
Yeah.
things of that nature. And I remember how astounded we were at people not knowing what
Mm.
those were,
Mhm.
when we were talking about it and when you then had the experience of speaking with that knowledge. And just seeing the way that, I think that we come through homeschooling, home education over the years. I think you see things, the shifts, you see people going from we have to do it just like schools are doing it so we can prove that our kids can still get in school and get into a college after they graduate, to this like wide pendulum swing to just like a very wild, free, learning through experiences kind of childhood. And, you've effectively found a balance. And I think that more and more now we see more families who embrace more of a wide range of the opportunities. Yes, you may do something very classical in your education with your children, but you also know that you can embrace experiences and being outside with your kids, letting them do a lot of hands-on things. And, I think that the thing that mostly you want to encourage is number one, the relationship so that you know what your
Yes.
child needs, right?
Yes.
And knowing the resources that are available. I can remember thinking so many times when we've talked through different workshops you've done, going into a convention, me feeling like this is going to really hit home with somebody who's not even like aware that this is an option right now, whether it's with their very young children or middle school age children, whatever it is, just to put a spark in their mind about what the opportunities are, what the options are. And you
Yes.
definitely are a person that inspires those sparks. And you've done it for me personally with my own children, but you also, I've seen you do that over and over again through articles you've written, through books that you've written, through speaking. And so knowing a little bit about your story now and the things that might have motivated you, this is another question I love to ask. Being a person of many words and books and things that, I always want to just write down or keep somewhere that encourage me. I always like to ask, are there words that you would share with someone who may be either dealing with, a child that was like young Cheryl? We don't really know what we're doing yet until we get there. Are words that just encouraged you to keep growing and learning yourself as you encountered your struggles? What words of wisdom would you have to share?
Oh boy, I would say it's one, relationships are so, so important.
Mm,
People are going to move. I tell my kids all the time, people are going to move in and out of your life, but your family is going to be there.
yeah.
Like they're not moving.
So
Like,
true. So
and,
true.
and I think I'm really seeing one of the things that I said at convention this year to families is you don't understand because you can't see it. I didn't see it either, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw it a little bit through my dad and my grandfather and their relationship, but I didn't understand it to the degree I do now. And that's the generational impact
Mm-hmm.
that you as a parent have. And it seems like at that moment you're potty training or that moment that you're struggling memorizing multiplication tables or that's what you got in the moment. And you're like, I don't understand. Like, how
Yeah.
is this going to impact anybody's life?
Mm-hmm.
And now as I watch my children potty train their children, or I watch my children stand up at a wedding for their nephew or for their cousins, their my nephews, and I've watched them grow up together and I see them stand along each other in a life event. I'm like, this is why we made the hard choices to maybe homeschool so we could have time with those families or those relationships.
Right.
So we could take the vacations we did together so that we could build those so that they could spend time with their grandparents who, goodness knows, none of us know the number of our days.
Mm,
And the value of spending time with my grandmother in the last 3 months of her life was so incredibly rich.
yeah.
Yes, algebra happened. Maybe it had to be put on the burner for a couple days so we could go hang out with her at her bedside and play bingo and do the things that show her what value she had, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the other thing about home education is you have the ability to show your kids this is the value that you bring. If an employer says to you, what value do you bring to my company? I hope that's not the first time you hear that question. I hope
Yeah.
that you hear that when you're 3 and you're 4 and saying, when people come over here, you make them feel so comfortable because you always ask them if you want a glass of water. And it's like, you have the gift of hospitality, or you have the ability to make things clear for people that nobody else. You sit with grandma for hours and just listen, and she needs that. What is the value that your child's going to bring? And when they understand that value, and that didn't hit me actually, Suzanne, until my oldest said to the second one, because my second one was going like on an interview,
Mm-hmm.
and the oldest one said to him, figure out what value you bring to that company. Now they were like 20s, maybe
Yeah.
18 and 24. And I went, oh my goodness, I'm seeing this full circle.
Mm,
Like we're trying to show our kids, what value do you have? You are valuable. I'm listening to you. I'm engaging with you. I'm being present with you. I care that multiplication makes sense to you. I'm going to sit
right.
here until we get it. I'm going to come along, like all those things that you're valuable. and how that came to be when they were 18 and 22 and saying, you know what, go in there and figure out how you can bring value to that company. I went, oh my goodness, they're so much smarter than me, right?
Yeah, like they got
Because I
it.
would have never thought to ask him that question, not ever.
Mm.
And then it's like now I see those young men pouring into my grandchildren and showing those grandchildren how they bring value. Like it just, Suzanne, it brings tears to my eyes
Yeah.
because it's a generational impact. And you don't see that when you're going through the really hard, everyday, monotonous, this is going to drive me crazy. Please read this book one more time. You know what,
Yes.
honey? I would love to read that book to you. There is nothing more valuable to me right now than reading this book to you.
Yeah.
And so, or there's nothing more valuable. My kids would be like, but mom, what about school? We're going to go spend time with grandma. I'm like, you know what? The most important thing right now is we get to spend time with her. We don't know how much time she has left. Huckleberry Finn will be there when we get back home tonight.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go show grandma that she's valued. And all of those things, that's home education to me. Like, yes, there's the book stuff, but there's so many bigger, greater things from a generational perspective that
Right.
we're laying groundwork for, just like my dad did when he took me to the chicken coop, or he took me to meet the Eggman, or he took me to go work in his workshop. He had to put down his paintbrush a ton of times to say, hey, Dad, what's this measurement again? Can you tell me show me this? And he's like, yeah, okay, sure. I'll be right there. Put his paintbrush down and showed me I had value.
Yeah.
And so what value do you have? The relationships and the value, I think, and the generational impact are things that we don't always see when we're in the day to day, but have incredible legacy for years, hopefully after we're gone, right?
Hopefully after we're gone. This is true. You know, and that is, I agree with you 100%. The relationships and the impact, you know, through your family, through generations that you can have because of relationship, because of pouring into people who matter to you and your family. And I love the fact that, you know, like you say, sometimes we forget, but family is always going to be there. It's always going to be a part of who we are. And really investing in that relationship is so important. And, you know, I know even with home education, sometimes we can make ourselves very busy, very scheduled, very,
Yes.
you know, classes outside of the home and things like that. And especially as our kids go into their middle and high school years. And sometimes I think people don't feel equipped to teach some of the classes that they need and things like that. And I always just like to, you know, encourage the people that I speak to, those relationships. You've got a foundation because of the years that they were young, but the relationships and the growth and the investment in those relationships still matters so much during those years. And, you know, don't hesitate to continue to invest in those and go deep in those relationships.
The tricky thing, I think, Suzanne, and we don't really think about this, is that relationship we build in the younger years. When you meet challenges, and I know that you understand this because you've graduated your own, when they come and they face hard things in high school, and they will. They could be a health challenge. It could be, you know, this school is recruiting me for collegiate athletics. Like, there's going to be things that they're going to need to walk through, and that foundation says to them, you know what, I know that my parents are going to come alongside of me, whatever this is. Like, I've got a unit, I've got a community behind me. I'm not walking this alone. And so those high school years, that could be hard, and they are. Like, there's a lot of times that I'm like, how am I going to teach that? You know, it surprises me. They're like, Mom, that doesn't matter. I could teach myself that. I'm like, you can? You tell me how you can do that, and we'll talk about this. And you know what? Every single time, they have incredible ideas about how they could learn XYZ subject
on their own,
and the people they could meet with and the books they could read. And a lot of times they've had to go look on, like, if it's a business, it's like, well, the top businessmen in the country are this, or the top global, this, that, and the other. And it's like, they wrote a book. I'm like, okay, why can't we use that? Like, those are the people that are meant, you know, they're mentor. Yes, it becomes a mentor, but those are the people that know things I don't know, or have a passion that I don't have. And when your kids know my parents are going to be there no matter what, like, they're going to help me walk through that, and they're going to help me find, and they're going to be open to, they're going to be interested into my ideas. It does make high school easy. I actually love the high school years, when you asked me about home education, I told my husband, yeah, we'll homeschool until with third grade because that's like my degree. Like that's where I top out. Early childhood,
Yes.
third grade. And besides that, I want to go back and teach in the classroom. And I tell people that all the time because I wanted to teach in the classroom. I wanted to help empower parents. And that's what I get to do, but totally in a different way than I ever thought that was possible.
Right.
All because I got out of that comfort zone of, you know what, I can only teach till third grade.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, if I empower my kids to be lifelong learners, they can learn almost anything because the motivation is there. I can come alongside. I can help them find resources. And actually, you know what, Suzanne, one of my greatest triumphs, I think, in this homeschooling journey, and you're going to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I failed Algebra 1, failed. I couldn't tell the difference between the letters and the numbers, right? Because it's not where I functioned.
Yeah.
It was not how I process things. And now I can teach Algebra 1 like nobody's business. And I can teach pretty much of all the Algebra 2 book. So it shows me there's motivation, there's interest, there's a person coming alongside and said, you can do this. I have all the faith in the world that you can do this.
Yeah.
And that's what my fourth grade teacher said. She said, you know what? You might not be able to read, but I have all the faith in the world that you can enter the Young Authors Contest. I'm like, how can I enter a Young Authors Contest? I can't read. And she's like, okay. And, my mom came along. She says, Cheryl, you tell me and I'll write it down. That's what we do in home education. Sometimes we take dictation from our kids. I gave her a great story. I have it, actually. I saved that book, and I was cleaning out my closet the other day with I was going through all the stuff that you keep from it. And it still made the cut this year. I'm keeping this book because it shows me that everybody in this world has value. And sometimes it takes is coming alongside them and saying, I have all the faith in the world that you're going to be able to do this. It might look different, but I have all the faith that we can do this. And my parents did that for me. My mom came alongside and said, you might not be able to do this assignment, but could we ask the teacher if we can do this assignment as a replacement? Yeah. We're still getting the same goal, but we're just going to look different. And so I guess, Suzanne, that's one of the greatest things I feel like right now is being able to come along my kids who learn. They haven't all been, learning challenges are real. I think every single one of us has. It's because our brain is, and somebody just doesn't understand how your brain works.
Exactly.
And so when you come alongside, you're like, oh, I get that. You need to see the commas in the right place all the time, about 50 times, not, when the page, I always laugh when the page says, put the commas in where they belong. And I'm thinking, I could never do that as a kid. It didn't make sense to me. And then I look at this child and I'm like, you need to see the commas in the right place over and over again. And then they come back around to you and they're like, Mom, I get it. I understand commas now. I'm like, tell me how that worked in your brain. How did you get that? So now it makes sense. And she said, I need to see it over and over and over again. And I went, oh my goodness, that's home education. We have the ability to come by alongside our kids and say, I'm interested in what you're doing. You have value. And I'm wholeheartedly believing that you're going to be able to do this. Yeah. This might look a little different for a while. It's okay.
It's okay. And it's a very successful opportunity for your kids to give them the confidence and the courage to continue on their path, even if it's not so much by the book, right? So that's what I love. That's what I love about the podcast, because, so many people who find success in the areas that they're gifted in do take a step outside of the norm and find their own way. And that's what's encouraging. And so I thank you for sharing your story. It's going to be very encouraging, I'm sure, to so many that will listen. And I just thank you for all of the investment that you've made in your children that I'm sure will carry on for generations, but also the investment that you've made in families who are homeschooling around you and far from you, even by sharing your wisdom and your wealth of knowledge. And so thank you so much. Thank you for being here today and talking with me, and just thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@fpea.com. Thanks again for listening, and be inspired to live your life not by the book.